Yeah. Well, let's talk about the last pick in the draft. Tony Elliott. Okay. Virginia replacing Bronco Mendenhall after Bronco Mendenhall went 9-5, 5-5, 6-6, which, you know, I think Tony Elliott at the time was seen as a good hire, but to be honest, I don't know that he was all that good at Clemson. Was he really that good? Was he as good as
I
people
mean,
say he was?
you had. I mean, I could have called offense there with Trevor Lawrence and Watson and all those guys there. I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah, he's done some nice things, I think, at Virginia in terms of offensively. You bring in Malik
Hmm.
Washington, who we were down on. I do really like the Andre Green and the Chris Tyree bringing those guys in. Obviously, Calandria is about as frisky as it gets in college football. And as a true freshman last year, he was just obviously you're gonna have some growing pains here, but he's a guy that I really think um hopefully Tony Elliott as an offensive guy himself should be able to get the most out of. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate the staff that he brought in this past year, Tyler Bowen and Chris Marr, but like, reality was, or sorry, I'm still talking about Brent Pry, aren't I? Tony Elliott, man. I mean, if Anthony Calandria like doesn't go in there like and do what he does, I know he didn't start every single game, but like there were some games that they won because of Calandria, right? I mean, like, sure they went, dude. I know they
I
had the
mean,
tragedy that happened to them, right? So they only ended up playing 10 games the year before, and that'll set a program back and all this stuff. But it feels like Tony Elliott, along with Billy Napier, have the least amount of job security of these basically third year head coaches, I guess.
I will say, like last year, your schedule was just pitiful in the ACC. Like you avoided a lot of the top dogs, which was good. But I mean, you played a lot of teams in the ACC really, really close. Other than Virginia Tech, who's your rival, but they were also clicking on all cylinders at that point, and Georgia Tech, who, by the way, I'm also super high on. Like every game was the Louisville game on that weeknight was close. Miami, you had to go to overtime. You lost. Student NC State, you played them close. Boston College, you played them close. So I mean, you're just here and there, but I also think that like I don't know, man. I mean, Calandra like against Mike Elko had 270, three touchdowns, and like you
That's
barely won
true.
against a beaten up Duke team. But like that's my point is like the talent level on the rest of the roster is not as spot where like consistently you can win 5 to 6 to 7 games to keep your job. And by the way, Virginia, I mean Bronco Mendenhall had great success there, but it is not an easy place to win at all in the 2000s. So
Well,
the
let's talk
reality
about
of the
Bronco
program,
Mendenhall. Let's talk
yeah.
about him. His recruiting rankings, he was 42nd when he was there, 53rd, 37th. Um, and then, those are good rankings. And then, you get Tony Elliott taking over and you go 64, 64, and now 88. You know, it's just like
Now, the 88 number is because they signed, you know,
not as many guys.
13 guys. But it's also like,
I know.
how many freshmen want to go play for Tony Elliott, understanding that his job security is not what it once was? I get you can transfer now whenever you want, but I think that's part of it too. Like it's hard to recruit at Virginia, but also hard to recruit when you haven't taken that step forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not very high on Tony Elliott, but like you said, you do bring up a good point, right? Like, what is the discussion right now if some of those games did turn out in their favor, right? Some of those one possession games, some of those late overtime games, like if that had happened, like then what are we talking about? Then it'd be a completely different conversation. But I mean, you still had a team that was outside the top 80 in points per game. You had a team that was outside the top 120 in points allowed per game. So I mean, you're looking at this is a bottom feeder team, and it takes a lot to when you dug a hole that big, and all you got's a shovel to dig yourself out of there. It's not easy. It's not easy.
No.